Hey, what's up, guys? I made a post the other day on Instagram and I got a lot of comments and a lot of feedback on it. And so I wanted to dive a little bit more into that. That post was about Instagram yoga and how, if you're new to yoga, it can be very discouraging if you are just scrolling through and seeing all of these really perfectly executed, maybe even really challenging poses, and you think that you should be where that person is or you should be able to do those things. But we really have to keep it in perspective because we don't see what's going on behind that pose. Right? We don't see the amount of time, the years, the hours put into that person's practice. I get it a lot of times in my own teaching. I've been practicing yoga for 10 years, right? That's a whole decade. And I apologize, my dog is tearing up a bone behind you. But that's 10 years. That's a lot of time to be practicing. And there were times when I was able to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours on my mat a day. Now, that was a different season than I am in now, but it really propelled my practice to where it is today. And so when I have students who are like, oh, I'll never be able to touch my toes, or I'll never be able to do what you do, and I'm thinking, well, maybe you can. If you consistently practice for 10 years, you might be able to touch your toes. So we really don't see the amount of time put into someone's practice when we're just scrolling through Instagram. I also talked about in that post like how our bodies are put together, and they're all put together differently, and we all have different ranges of motion. We all have things that we're just kind of better at, or we have hamstrings that are just naturally long. And for me personally, my hamstrings have always been fairly long. I haven't had to do too much work there, but I also have shorter legs, and so here's just an example. It makes it really easy for me to, step my foot up to the top of my mat. I don't have to force it. There's not a lot, there's not a lot here to have to move up. So, having shorter legs is very beneficial when trying to step up to the top of my mat. However, I had a student who went through my teacher training program, and she always had to, kick her foot to the outside of her hand to get her foot up. And obviously it requires core strength, hip flexor strength to get the foot up there. But you can have all of that and still have a really long shin bone, which is what she had. Her mother actually told her when she was in the womb that the doctor was shocked at how long her shin bone was. So that is just the way her body is made. There is nothing she can do about that. There may be a little bit more core strength that she can get, but I mean, her leg is, in proportion to her arms, she may always have to kick her foot out to the side to get it to the top of her mat. Doesn't make her any less of a yogi that she has to do that. On the other hand, for me, and what I really wanted to talk about today is tension versus compression. So at some point, we have this range of motion. At some point, we're going to hit bone on bone, right? Someone's range of motion may be here, and they can't go any further past that. Mine's here. Someone else's could be much greater than that, and it's just how our bodies are put together. I feel in my wrist, I hit compression pretty quickly. If I shift my shoulders forward, I can't go any further than this before the pad of my hand starts to lift. So where does that come into play? It makes crow is with elbows bent. It makes crane really difficult to do. Now I can do it because I've strengthened my hands enough that I can hang out, I can float the pad of my hand up and hang out there for a little bit. But again, you have to ask yourself, is that healthy, and is that worth me straightening out my arms? It's really not that important. So I'll opt to keep my elbows bent and not worry about having straight arms. Doesn't make me any less of a person if I can't straighten my arms. But here's something about that. I think more times than not, especially if you're new to the practice, it could be tension. So let's just take my wrist here. If I shift forward and I feel this in the back of my wrist, then that's tension, right? Those are muscles, there's tendons there, maybe even some fascia that I can stretch and loosen up and release to allow me to shift forward a little bit more. I unfortunately feel that in the front, right? So that's bone on bone. It feels like I'm kind of hitting a wall. I can't go any further. And again, so that's compression, and there's not anything I can do about that. So I just kind of wanted to mention those things so that you could keep it in perspective, and instead of maybe getting discouraged, at the poses that you see on Instagram, you can either, be inspired by them and see what's possible or what's available. But I would also challenge you to really tune into your own body, kind of assess yourself, see, the proportion of your body, and see where in your practice it might make things a little bit more difficult, or where it might make things a little easier. And if it's difficult, it might very well be impossible, and that's okay. I have completely given up on, and I hate to say that, because I don't like giving up on anything, but I've spent many years just mentally frustrated and trying to break through that Lolasana wall. I can hold it for very little, but it's no longer at the top of my list. If it ever happens, great, but I'm not, some things you just have to let go of. So anyway, I hope you found this encouraging. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and maybe check out some of my other videos and get a little practice in. All right, guys, see ya.